Wind in the high pines. The recorder sits warm against a thigh. Night folds over the valley like a wool blanket. And then a howl that stretches thin and long, drawn out like a question into the dark. It trembles on the microphone, wavering with the breath of the trees. Listen closely now. The ridge answers.
If you're with me in a dark room, headphones on, good. That's where this works best. Tonight's story is called Pack Bearing. For the next hour, I want you to move with me across damp transects and lamplit benches, into the odd, patient art of listening, and into a place where animal voices become clues, and clues become ethical questions.
There's a valley I know, high serrated ridges, a few weathered logging roads, and a network of passive acoustic loggers tucked like quiet sentries into the understory. Volunteers placed them along the contour, one on the eastern spur, one near the creek, another under a broken stand of firs. They're not there to hunt sound or to stir it, just to record, to collect a kind of data that only patience can coax out. The volunteer in this story, let's call them Mara, walked those transects in late autumn. Mud on the boots, headlamp beams slicing through fog. Mara checked battery levels and SD cards, humming a little to cut the cold. On the second pass, she noticed something odd. The same long, keening wolf howl appearing on different devices, on different nights. Not the same file duplicated, but the same voice, recorded in places spaced miles apart. She didn't post it online. She didn't shout it into a forum. She logged bearings.
Why log bearings? Because every microphone, every timestamp gives you a tiny vector, an angle on where that sound probably came from. You can't point an arrow and say definitively, here. You can, however, sketch lines and look for where those lines cross. Sometimes they scatter like angry birds. Sometimes they intersect in a single worrying place. And that's what happened. Late November recordings, Tuesday night, Thursday night, the week before a cold snap, produced bearings that, when overlaid, converged near an overgrown spur. That spur sat inside a search perimeter from a long, cold disappearance years earlier. The map looked like a compass rose pointing at someone else's absence. Mara felt that shiver, the professional, private kind, and then did the deliberate thing, record, annotate, and reach out to authorities with the data in hand rather than a shout into the dark.
Now, I want to be very clear. Animal calls are not forensic fingerprints. They're complex, context-dependent, and easily misread. I talked to 3 people to unpack that complexity. A canid ethologist explained how pack calls function, how a chorus can bias bearings because multiple animals will call from different positions, and how territorial rallies can attract other wolves like spokes on a wheel. An acoustic analyst walked me through spectrograms, cross-correlation, and error margins. And a search and rescue coordinator described the thresholds that turn curiosity into a coordinated, permitted field response.
The ethologist told me that wolves are social radio. They call to hold territory, to gather the pack before a hunt, to mark presence during low visibility. Those long, keening howls can propagate farther on calm nights. They can echo off ridgelines, and they can be mimicked by the wind tussling in a dead branch. You have to treat those howls as probabilistic signals, she said. They suggest presence, not specifics.
The acoustic analyst, his voice steady, precise, talked me through triangulation. He sketched imaginary lines, the bearing from recorder A at 0217, recorder B at 0221, recorder C at 0219. Each line carries an angle of uncertainty. The spectrogram reveals the call's frequency sweep and its harmonics, but ambient noise, running water, the distant drone of a highway, a coyote singing, smears that clarity. Small timing errors, clock drift in cheap recorders,
Even a misplaced time zone stamp can push a vector miles off. He said, never trust a single crossing. Look for pattern, repeatability, and corroboration.
The SAR coordinator gave me the human side, families waiting, volunteer teams standing by, budgets and permits and safety. He described how they decide when an acoustic tip becomes an actionable lead. It's not about excitement. It's about probability and risk. Risk to searchers, to wildlife, and to the integrity of the scene. He said, we can't chase every hopeful line on a map, but we can test the best ones with calibrated equipment and people who know how not to disturb the animals.
This is the moral pulsing at the center of the story. What do you do when the land speaks in ways you almost understand? Mara and the volunteers chose patience. They anonymized recorder locations. They prepared documentation, time-stamped clips, spectrogram snapshots, error envelopes, and they contacted accredited teams. They did not, and I repeat, did not go blaring howls back into the woods or post high-resolution files with coordinates. This is important. Do not approach, mimic, or attempt to record wildlife without permission. It can endanger you and the animals, and it corrodes trust with land stewards. Then came the hardest step, the overlay that didn't scatter. 3 nights, multiple bearings, repeated spectral signatures. The vectors met within a scrubbed, unmowed bench inside that old search perimeter. It wasn't proof. It was a signal that merited a test. The SAR coordinator organized a field verification, a supervised dusk deployment with calibrated recorders, strict protocols to minimize disturbance, and only accredited personnel on that ridge. I can still feel the texture of that evening. The professionals moved like people trained to belong to their gear. Zippered packs, annotated clipboards, held radios with soft beeps. They set recorders on tripods, microphones angled like ears, and took environmental notes, wind speed, temperature, moon phase. Everyone agreed, no imitation calls, no flashing lights, no moving off planned routes. The goal was not confrontation. It was listening under laboratory conditions in the wild. At dusk, the valley went quiet in that beautiful, expectant way. Then the first call, single, stretched, came up from the dark like someone dragging a bow across a low string. It sounded much closer than the bearings suggested. The recorders captured it with crystalline lines on the spectrogram. Then another, different timbre, answered from a ridge I couldn't see. Layered howls, overlapping. We watched the spectrogram grow like an ancient conversation written in light. For a moment, standing there, hope rose in a way that felt almost indecent. Hope that sound might resolve into something that could be acted upon. But experts reminded us, gently, wolves shift, they travel, they sometimes call to empty spaces. An acoustic convergence might be a behavioral hotspot, or it might be an illusion stitched by echo and the geometry of ridges. The acoustic analyst pointed to the error envelopes and said, "This is compelling, not conclusive." After the field test, agencies reviewed the data. They ran cross-checks with GPS, with historic search logs, with ranger patrol records. The family of the missing person, who'd lived with an absence that shaped years, was contacted with care and transparency. That's the other part of this story. Ethics in practice means conversation and consent. You don't hand them speculation. You offer context, probabilities, and next steps led by professionals. Sometimes that's all anyone can or should expect. A thorough, responsible attempt to turn wonder into evidence without collateral harm. In the weeks that followed, the agencies tempered public statements with caveats. They confirmed increased wolf activity in the general area, consistent with seasonal patterns, and a nearby den reported years prior. They also published nothing in the way of exact recorder coordinates or raw, high-resolution clips
that could enable amateur triangulation or disturb sensitive habitat. The acoustic findings remained classified within the investigation and shared only with accredited partners.
So, what do we take from this? First, listening is powerful. Passive acoustic monitoring lets us detect life that otherwise remains invisible. It can point to patterns researchers might never have known to look for. Second, interpretation is hard. Animal calls are behavior wrapped in context. Echoes, social dynamics, and technological limitations all tuck into the signal. Third, ethics matter. The temptation to broadcast a haunting howl for viral attention can harm animals, mislead searches, and undermine trust between volunteers and professionals.
There's an image I can't shake. The layered howl we recorded that dusk. On the spectrogram, it looks like braided light, overlapping sweeps that rise and fall. Beautiful, suggestive, unresolved. It's the sound of a land that remembers its own history in sound. It's also a reminder that sometimes the best path forward is to let professionals take the lead and to support them with good data and patient restraint. A few practical notes before you go. If you keep loggers or you're curious about acoustic monitoring, follow these rules. Do not approach or play calls back into the environment. Anonymize precise locations when sharing publicly. Timestamp everything and include method notes. And reach out to licensed wildlife agencies or accredited acoustic labs if you think you found something significant. If you're a listener who loves the thrill of a raw howl, quiet that urge to imitate. It's kinder for the animals and safer for you.
There's a small, final awkwardness in this tale. We wanted answers. The land offered sound. Scientists offered context and caution. Agencies offered procedure. The family offered patience and hope. And in the middle of it all, a volunteer chose not to make the scream louder, but to map the quiet and pass those maps along to the people trained to interpret them. That choice felt like dignity to me.
Now, the last image. The one-layered howl, recorded, filed away. It fades into the trees on the tape, the harmonics wobbling, the tail drifting like smoke. Beautiful, suggestive, unresolved. And in the dark of the ridge, something moved, and then was still. Are you still with me? Because this is where the story tucks itself into your ear and waits.
If this episode stayed with you, if the idea of animals speaking in vectors and the weight of responsible listening struck a chord, subscribe to Nature's Dread. Share this episode, but please, when you do, remember the rules. Don't publish raw coordinates. Don't mimic wildlife. And if you think you found something, report it to park authorities or accredited labs. We'll leave resources and contacts in the episode notes for anyone who wants to learn more or to donate time safely.
I'm Sam Nang. Thank you for walking this ridge with me, quietly, patiently, and with curiosity. Until next time, check the corners.